Imagine scrubbing your skin clean, not with soap, but with a curved metal blade. No bubbles. No scents. Just oil, sweat, and a tool called the Strigil that the Romans didn't just bathe. They scraped that, and what they left behind wasn't just dirt. It was a glimpse into one of the world's most unusual hygiene rituals that if strange ancient habits fascinate you, hit subscribe, because this isn't just about bathing, that it's about how Rome stayed clean. By getting dirty first, in ancient Rome, soap wasn't the answer to hygiene. In fact, they didn't even use it, at least not the way we do today. Instead, Roman bathhouses used something far stranger: oil and scraping. Yes, oil. Men, women, even gladiators would cover their bodies in warm olive oil before entering the baths. And instead of rinsing off with water and suds, they used a tool, a curved, dull-edged blade. Not sharp like a knife, not soft like a sponge. It was called a strigil. And to a Roman, it was cleaner than soap could ever be. The strigil was a small, curved instrument, usually made of bronze or iron. Simple in shape, but sacred in routine. After rubbing oil all over the skin, Romans would drag the strigil across their body, scraping away sweat, dirt, and dead skin. The motion was slow and deliberate, almost like grooming a horse. In fact, the same technique was used on animals too, but in Roman culture, it wasn't just about hygiene, it was about status. Only the wealthy had access to fine oils and private strigils, and in public bathhouses, having a slave to scrape you clean meant you truly arrived. For Romans, bathing wasn't a quick, private routine. It was a daily event. Men, and sometimes women, would spend hours in massive bath complexes. They exercised in the palestra, then oiled themselves down, and finally headed to the tepidarium or caldarium, warm and hot rooms to sweat it out. And the strigil? It wasn't used in silence. It scraped alongside gossip, politics, business deals. It was common to see senators, merchants, and philosophers being cleaned by their slaves. While discussing empire, war, or love, the strigil didn't just clean the body. It rubbed elbows with power. What happened to the scraped-off mixture of oil, sweat, and grime? It had a name: smegma. And while most would assume it was tossed away, some of it wasn't. In fact, it was collected. Some Roman physicians believed it held medicinal properties mixed with certain herbs. It was used in ancient remedies for joint pain, skin conditions, even to boost fertility. Yes, the very filth scraped from a gladiator's body might end up in a healing salve. To us, it sounds disturbing, but to them, it was just another way the body could serve the bodied. Even in filth, the Romans found function. While strigils were used across Roman society, they didn't all look the same. The wealthy owned engraved, personalized strigils, some made of silver, others gilded with gold. They stored them in leather kits, alongside perfume bottles and tweezers. That poorer citizens, however, made do with simple iron blades. Their oil was cheaper, their scraping rougher. And unlike the elite, they didn't have slaves to help them. But the act was the same: rub, scrape, rinse. In a way, the strigil became a symbol, one of the few tools that crossed social boundaries, because rich or poor, clean skin was Roman pride. In 01 embraced the strigil more than Roman athletes and gladiators. Before every match or training, their bodies were rubbed with oil, not for vanity, but for performance. The sheen made muscles look more defined. It also made skin slippery, harder for opponents to grab. Afterward, the strigil scraped off not just dirt, but blood and sand. In arenas like the Colosseum, oil and strigil weren't luxuries, they were armor. And in gymnasiums, young men treated the scraping ritual almost like a sacred rite, preparing their bodies not just for strength, but for admiration. To the Romans, cleanliness wasn't just physical. It was philosophical. The act of scraping off filth symbolized purging excess, ego, and impurity. Stoic thinkers like Seneca spoke of bathing as a form of discipline. Even emperors saw it as a moment to reflect, not indulged. In quiet corners of the bathhouse, men debated ethics, while dragging iron across their shoulders. The strigil wasn't glamorous, but in a society obsessed with control, it was a perfect metaphor. You strip away the surface to reveal the self beneath. Clean body, clear mind. That was the Roman ideal. For most elites, the strigil was never held by their own hands. It was wielded by slaves, called bath attendants or gladiators. These men were trained not just in technique, but in timing. Too hard, and they could injure delicate skin. Too soft, and they'd be scolded for laziness. Their job was intimate, repetitive, and often invisible, yet they knew the secrets of the empire. Who whispered what in the steam room? Who bore scars from battle or bruises from lovers? They were cleaners, but they were also silent observers in the empire's most vulnerable spaces. Though public baths were mostly male-dominated, Roman women had their own bathing rituals, often in private areas or at separate times. And yes, they used strigils too. Their strigils were often more delicate, thinner, sometimes shaped like crescent moons, crafted from finer metals. But the process was similar: oil, massage, scrape. Some upper-class women even had their own personal attendants trained in the art of gentle strigil use. For them, it wasn't just cleansing. It was luxury. A spa ritual before donning silks and perfumes. Behind the marble walls, a silent elegance unfolded, metal against skin, privacy wrapped in tradition. Even Roman children were introduced to strigils from a young age, not out of vanity, but to teach them the value of discipline and hygiene. Mothers rubbed oil into their children's skin while nurses gently scraped them clean. For boys, it became part of their transition to manhood. For girls, a quiet routine of refinement in a world without soap. These daily rituals shaped identity. The strigil wasn't just a tool. It was a teacher, a curved piece of metal that reminded every child in Rome to be clean was to be civilized. The strigil's role didn't end with life. Archaeologists have found them buried beside the dead, especially athletes, soldiers, and noblemen. Why? Because in Roman belief, the body should enter the afterlife just as it lived, cared for, clean, and honored. Some tombs even contained strigils wrapped in cloth, resting beside combs and oil flasks. To bury a man with his strigil was to say he lived with discipline. He died with pride. It was more than hygiene. It was identity. Even in death, the curved blade whispered. This was a Roman. As the Roman Empire declined, so did its bathing culture. Public bathhouses, once centers of daily life, began to rot. Plague spread, resources thinned, and the grand rituals faded. Strigils, once polished and prized, were tossed aside, relics of a forgotten pride. The rise of Christianity also played a role. Nudity, once normalized in Roman baths, was now seen as immodest. Slowly, the culture of oil and scraping was replaced by cloth and modesty. And the strigil became a museum piece, but its ghost still lingers, curved, cold, and oddly elegant. A reminder of a time when metal met flesh in the name of honor. Modern historians and medical researchers have studied the strigil's effects, and the verdict is surprising. The scraping technique was actually effective for exfoliation. It removed dead skin, improved circulation, and helped clear pores. In fact, it shares similarities with today's spa treatments, like dry brushing or metal gua sha tools. Though primitive by our standards, the Romans understood something timeless: that cleansing isn't just about water, it's about friction, flow, pressure. The strigil wasn't just for looks. It promoted health in ways they never fully understood, yet instinctively practiced every day. A small blade of bronze, that's all it was. But the strigil told stories of emperors and slaves, of rituals and beliefs, of how a civilization treated its body. It was passed hand to hand, bath to bath, generation to generation. It bore witness to laughter, gossip, betrayal, even grief. And in its quiet scraping, it reflected something uniquely Roman: a culture obsessed not just with appearance, but with order, control, and pride. No perfumes, no soaps. Just oil, metal, and skin. Cleanliness wasn't comfort. It was discipline. Today, we step into showers, squeeze soap, and forget the ritual. But Rome remembered that in their hands. The strigil wasn't strange. It was sacred. It cleaned emperors before war and gladiators after battle. That shaped a nation's identity, one scrape at a time. Now housed in museums, these little curved blades whisper of a time when to be Roman was to be scraped, not scrubbed. No foam, no fragrance, just oil, steel, and pride. And in every shine of bronze, a reflection of a civilization that cleaned itself with precision, not perfume.